I still remember the first time Brian and I unlocked the doors to break through technologies. We were younger then, hungrier, standing in a tiny co-working space with borrowed desks and one printer that jammed every 30 minutes. But we had vision, we had drive, and we had each other. 15 years later, that company had become a multi-million-dollar empire, over 500 employees, offices in 3 countries, IPO just months away. And somehow, in all that time, I didn't see the betrayal coming. My name is Rachel. I'm 52 years old. I'm an MBA from a top-tier school, a former CFO, and until recently, the woman behind the man you've probably seen on tech magazine covers. My ex-husband, Brian. He's the one they called visionary, dynamic, the face of innovation. He gave the speeches. I made the numbers work. He posed for the cameras. I built the systems that kept the lights on. For most of our marriage, I was content with that. I believed in our partnership. I believed in him. But success does strange things to some men. Brian began spending less time at home. Late meetings, business trips, missed anniversaries. It's just the pressure, I told myself. The company's growing. He's just tired. Then came Lisa, 27, bright-eyed, always in 4-inch heels and tighter dresses than necessary. She was hired as his executive assistant. No big deal. We've had many over the years, but Lisa wasn't like the others. She stayed late. She traveled on every urgent trip. She started using phrases Brian used, started sitting in on meetings that had nothing to do with her role. I asked Brian about it once. "She's just eager," he said. "You could learn a thing or two from that." That was the first cut. It didn't bleed, but it left a scar. I started noticing the little things, whispers in the hallway, looks that quickly disappeared when I entered a room, emails marked confidential that had my name missing from the CC line. Then one night, Brian left his tablet on the kitchen counter, still unlocked. I wasn't looking for anything, but something, intuition maybe, pulled me in. Messages, dozens of them, from Lisa, flirty, intimate, personal, photos, plans, hotel reservations, and then one message from Brian to her. "Once she's out, we can finally run this thing our way." My hands were shaking. But I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I took screenshots. I emailed them to myself. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. Instead, I started watching, listening, connecting dots I had ignored for too long. Then came the meeting. A surprise board meeting called by Brian, with me left off the calendar invite. I only found out because a junior analyst accidentally forwarded me the agenda. When I walked into the boardroom, every head turned like I wasn't supposed to be there. Brian cleared his throat. "Rachel," he said like a stranger. "I was going to loop you in afterward, but since you're here..." He clicked a slide on the screen. Strategic restructuring, that's what he called it. A proposal to remove me from all executive roles, citing misalignment with the company's aggressive growth direction. Lisa, smiling, polished, was named Interim Director of Strategic Development. I stared at them both. No one met my eyes. Then Brian leaned forward and said calmly, like he was doing me a favor, "You'll land on your feet, but this world isn't kind to people who can't evolve." I said nothing. I stood, collected my notes, walked out. And as I pressed the elevator button with a hand that didn't tremble, I thought, they think it's over. They think they've won. They have no idea what I'm capable of. They thought I'd disappear. I did, but only to prepare for war. Have you ever been pushed aside by someone you helped succeed Where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know where these stories are reaching. And if you think Rachel should walk away or fight back, what would you do in her place? Let me know. And don't forget to subscribe to Sophia's revenge stories. You don't want to miss what happens next. They didn't just kick me out of a company. They kicked me out of something I helped build. Brick by brick, line by line, dollar by dollar. For 15 years, Brian and I built breakthrough technologies. From scratch. He pitched. I financed. He dreamed. I delivered. And now? I was out. Just like that. The official story was that I had stepped down for personal reasons. A vague press release. A carefully staged photo of Lisa shaking hands with board members. And a thank you statement from Brian that ended with, "We wish Rachel the best in her future endeavors." They didn't even use the word co-founder, not once. The severance package they offered was insulting, a quarter of what it should have been. And it came with a non-compete clause that would have legally muzzled me for years. I didn't sign it. I walked away with nothing but a manila envelope of legal drafts, a USB drive of documents I'd quietly saved over the years, and the one thing no one could take from me, my name. At first, I broke. I'd love to tell you I sprang into action, plotting revenge like some cool-headed strategist in a movie. But the truth? I cried, alone, for days, the kind of crying that leaves your chest sore and your voice hoarse, the kind that strips you bare and makes you question everything. I cried for the company I lost. I cried for the marriage I wasted. But mostly, I cried for the version of me that believed I was safe. Then came the silence, and in the silence, I started thinking. Brian had underestimated me. Everyone had. And I realized something chillingly beautiful. That's exactly what I needed, because when people don't see you coming, they don't see what hits them. I started reading. Laws about corporate fraud, SEC filings, board voting procedures. I met with a therapist. I told her everything. Not just about Brian, but about the version of me I'd lost along the way. The Rachel who used to dream in spreadsheets and speak fluent strategy. The Rachel who didn't ask for permission to be brilliant. And I made a promise to her. To myself. I was going to get everything back. But not like them. Not with lies. Not with manipulation, with strategy, with truth, with patience, and with receipts. So I called an old friend, Grace, who used to be our senior accountant before she quit abruptly 3 years ago. "Why did you really leave?" I asked. She hesitated, then told me everything. The financial red flags, the offshore transfers, the unreported bonuses. She'd raised concerns. Brian shut her down. Lisa handled the rest. And just like that, I had my first thread. I started pulling. And the more I pulled, the more everything began to unravel. It started small. A call here, a quiet meeting there. I kept things off the grid. No digital trail, no whispers at coffee shops. Just questions. Pointed, specific questions to people who once trusted me, and in many ways, still did. Grace gave me the names of 2 junior accountants who had quietly left the company within 6 months of each other. Both had noticed irregularities, expenses that didn't match invoices, client contracts missing from quarterly audits, massive executive bonuses with no board approval. They had reported it, softly, carefully, internally. Nothing happened. Actually, something did happen. One was restructured out of her role. The other was demoted to a data entry position until she quit. Pattern found. I documented everything. Then I found myself dialing the number of someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Ben Whitaker. One of the few board members who hadn't been. part of Brian's social club. Ben was smart, old school, and deeply protective of the company's reputation. He'd always liked me, trusted me, and I needed that trust now more than ever. We met for lunch, off the record. I laid it out, not all of it, just enough to plant the seed. I can't move unless I have proof, he said carefully. But if you get it, you'll have my vote. That was all I needed. I called my attorney next, not just any lawyer, Carolyn Roth, the best corporate governance attorney in the state, fierce, unshakable, and worth every painful penny. We reviewed everything. She helped me formalize the timeline, create a dossier, build a case, one strong enough to shake up the boardroom and possibly trigger a criminal investigation. Next came the journalist, Maya Tran, investigative business reporter with a reputation for two things: brutal accuracy and airtight sources. I don't want a scandal, I told her. I want the truth, and I want accountability. She raised an eyebrow. And revenge? I smiled. That's just a bonus. Meanwhile, I was also watching the stock. Breakthrough's valuation had peaked after the IPO announcement, but rumors had started to swirl. Quiet ones. Investors were uneasy. Brian was still talking big, but the numbers weren't adding up. Perfect. Because when a company stumbles, its enemies don't have to knock. They get invited in. I liquidated a portion of my retirement, used it to discreetly begin acquiring shares. Tiny amounts, spread out through small firms and allies. I didn't need majority control. I just needed a seat at the table when the house started to burn, and it would burn. Carolyn filed preliminary documents to protect me from retaliation. Grace and two former employees agreed to submit affidavits. Maya's story was coming together. We were almost ready. But before we struck, I needed to do one more thing. I had to confront the part of me that still hoped Brian would do the right thing. I had to kill that hope. Because once I released it, I would be free to move exactly as I needed, without hesitation, without guilt, without second-guessing. I sat alone in my apartment one night, lit only by the glow of my laptop. The dossier was open in front of me. Dozens of files, emails, spreadsheets, a paper trail that told a story no press release could bury. And I whispered to no one in particular. You took everything from me. Now I'm going to take it all back, with interest. And tomorrow morning, I make my first move. I made my move at 9:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. No press conference, no drama. Just one email to the SVI with attachments, and another to Maya Tran, the journalist, marked confidential, with a note that simply said, "It's time." Within 24 hours, it began. Breakthrough Technologies under investigation for financial misconduct. The headline screamed across the front page of Techline Daily. Inside was a scathing exposé, anonymous sources, whistleblower quotes, leaked emails, expert analysis of falsified reports and offshore transfers. A quiet mention of a high-ranking executive, known for cleaning up other people's messes. Lisa Bryant's photo was featured at the top, not smiling this time. The stock price dipped 14% that day. He went into damage control mode immediately. He called emergency meetings, released bland defensive statements, claimed it was a coordinated smear campaign orchestrated by disgruntled former employees. But the thing about smoke, it makes people look for fire. By day 3, institutional investors began demanding an internal audit. By day 5, the board called an emergency session, without Brian. Lisa started panicking. She stopped posting her usual carefully filtered, Photos of CEO mornings and grind-set hustle. She looked over her shoulder in meetings, started avoiding Brian's calls. It didn't take long before she reached out to me. A blocked number. I picked up. "Rachel," she said, her voice strained. I didn't know it would go this far." I said nothing. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just... Brian promised..." "Lisa," I interrupted. "You made your choices. Now live with them." She begged for a meeting. I declined. But my lawyer didn't. Carolyn arranged a formal deposition. Under oath. Lisa, it turns out, was more afraid of prison than she was loyal to Brian. She turned over dozens of encrypted emails, internal memos, even a spreadsheet labeled Comp Strategy, off books. That one nearly made Carolyn laugh out loud. By the end of the week, a full-scale federal investigation had begun. Subpoenas were issued. Devices were seized. Brian. He was still denying everything, until the board froze his access to internal systems and placed him on administrative leave. And that was when I struck again. While the stock was still dropping, and panic was high, I moved through my silent partners and acquired just enough shares to call for a special board vote. The goal: remove Brian permanently. I walked into that boardroom in a navy blue suit, my hair up, eyes steady. The same room where they had once voted me out without hesitation. This time I didn't come alone. Carolyn stood at my side. Ben Whitaker sat on the board now as my ally. Investors were present, angry, disillusioned, ready for change. And the vote, 6-1. Brian was officially removed as CEO. The one dissenting vote was an empty chair. He didn't even show up. I stood at the head of the table where Brian used to sit and said the words I had been preparing for weeks. "Gentlemen and ladies, thank you for your trust. I built this company once. I'm ready to rebuild it again, without shortcuts, without secrets, and without cowards." Applause. Just a few claps at first, then more. I didn't cry. Not yet. That came later. That came when I stepped outside, looked up at the building, and realized I was back. And this time, I owned it. But the war wasn't over. Brian wasn't done. And neither was I. The air in the office felt different. Not lighter, clearer. Like the weight had finally shifted off everyone's shoulders. Breakthrough. Technologies had been cracked wide open. And now, for the first time in years, people weren't whispering. In the hallways, they were talking out loud. About ideas. About ethics. About change. And it started with me. As interim CEO, my first act was to clean house. Lisa was officially terminated, though she avoided criminal charges by fully cooperating with investigators. She submitted a formal letter of apology. Not to me, but to the employees. I posted it, unedited, on the internal portal, not for sympathy, for accountability. The rest of the executive team? Reviewed, reevaluated. Some stayed, some didn't. I reinstated Grace as head of finance. I promoted 2 women from product and engineering. Women who had been overlooked for years because they didn't play golf with the right men. I met with every department head, one by one. I didn't talk. I listened. And what I heard broke my heart. People were exhausted, silenced, overworked, afraid to speak up. That ended under my watch. I restructured leadership to be collaborative, not top-down. I introduced real transparency, open financial dashboards, anonymous feedback lines, shared quarterly goals. It wasn't just about fixing the books. It was about rebuilding trust. We also paused the IPO, for now. The market wanted us to rush back in to rebound quickly, but I wasn't interested in rebound. I was interested in resilience. We took a step back, refocused our product strategy, reconnected with clients, reviewed every contract signed in the last 3 years. The surprising thing, the clients stayed, even with the headlines, even with the drama, because they believed in the people, and the people were starting to believe in themselves again. Investors slowly returned. Stock prices stabilized. A respected industry journal ran the headline, "Breakthrough isn't just back, it's better." I could have stopped there, but I didn't, because what happened to me wasn't unique. It was just quiet. So I launched something new, the Rachel Initiative de Mentorship and Funding Program for women over 40 re-entering the business world after betrayal, divorce, layoffs, or burnout. Women who had been dismissed, underestimated, or erased, just like I was. I gave them funding. I gave them resources. I gave them what no one gave me, a second chance without judgment. And you know what? They soared. One woman started a fintech app for single mothers. Another launched a data analytics firm run entirely by women returning to the workforce. Every time I watched one of them pitch to investors, I felt something deeper than pride. I felt like I had finally rewritten the ending. Not just for me, but for others. And then, one morning, my assistant knocked on my office door with a quiet voice. "Rachel, Brian's here." I looked up from my laptop. "Does he have an appointment?" "No. But he asked if you had 10 minutes. I didn't answer right away, because after everything, I did. But on my terms, I told her to send him in. It was time. He looked smaller. Brian stood in the doorway, suit wrinkled, eyes tired, the confident smirk long gone. He held a manila envelope like it might shield him from everything that had happened. "Rachel," he said softly. I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat. There was a long silence. I let it stretch. I wasn't rushing to make him comfortable. Not anymore. I just wanted to talk, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Talk. He looked around the office. My office. The one he used to sit in. The one I had repainted, refurnished, and reclaimed. I made mistakes, he said. Too many to count. I lost everything. This company, my reputation. He paused, looked down at his hands. I lost you. That part? That didn't sting anymore. You didn't lose me, Brian, I said calmly. You gave me away, piece by piece. He nodded slowly. I thought I was invincible. He admitted. I thought I didn't need you anymore. He looked up, and for the first time I saw something real. Regret. Do you ever think we could— No, I said gently but firmly. He nodded again. No fight, no protest. Just quiet acceptance. I'm sorry, he said. I believe you, I replied. But I also know that an apology doesn't entitle you to return. He reached for the envelope. I wanted you to have these. Old photos, early business notes, handwritten drafts. You saved everything. I didn't. I took the envelope. Not because I needed it, but because it felt like closing a loop. He stood to leave. Rachel, he said at the door. You did? Good. You really did. I always did, I said. You just didn't notice. He left, and just like that, the last door I had been holding open in my mind quietly closed. A week later, Lisa requested a meeting. I almost said no, but something told me to hear her out. She arrived in a simple dress, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked real, and scared. "I've started over," she said. "Back to school. Business classes. Real ones this time." I nodded. "I know what I did," she continued. "It was selfish and stupid, and I let someone else convince me that stepping on you was the way up." I didn't say anything. I'm not asking for anything, just maybe someday, when people ask about me, you won't tell them I was just the girl who slept her way too. A scandal. I looked at her. "You weren't just that, Lisa," I said. "You were also smart, ambitious, and desperate. Next time, choose the first two." She left with tears in her eyes, and I felt lighter. That night, I stood at the edge of the rooftop terrace of Breakthrough HQ, looking out over the city, the same city where I had been erased, and where I had rewritten everything. Behind me, the company was thriving. Ahead of me, a new chapter, one I didn't have to be afraid of anymore. A journalist called the next morning, asking for a quote for an article titled, "Women Who Came Back Stronger." I gave her this: "Sometimes life burns your house down just to show you can build a fortress. From the ashes. They tried to bury me, but I was the seed. What did Rachel's story make you feel? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? From family, from love, or from work? Comment 2 if you loved Rachel's transformation. Comment 7 if this story hit you hard, but gave you hope. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Sophia's revenge stories for more true, powerful tales where women rise from the fire with their crowns still on. Your next favorite story is already on its way.